As-salāmu alaykum wa raḥmatullāhi wa barakātuh. May the peace and mercy and blessings of Allah be upon you. Beloved brothers and sisters, seekers of light and listeners of truth, I welcome you today to a journey unlike any other. Before we open this sacred scroll of divine history, I invite you to subscribe to Islam Voice. This space is a refuge for the soul, a well of wisdom flowing from the ocean of revelation. If your heart yearns for stories rooted in the Quran and rich in purpose, let your presence be part of this growing ummah of seekers. Now let us begin. Let your heart slow down and your ears awaken. Let us walk through time into the pages of a chapter that echoes with power, mystery, and faith. There once lived a woman whose name would resonate through centuries, a queen whose throne shone like the stars and whose kingdom bathed in wealth and brilliance. She was Bilqis, the Queen of Sheba, and her story is one of divine encounter, of transformation, and of a choice between the worship of creation and the surrender to the Creator. Many tales have been spun about her. Some say she was the daughter of a human king and a jinn. Others claim she possessed supernatural abilities. And yet the Quran does not rely on fantasy. It speaks with clarity and purpose. The story of Bilqis is preserved in Surah An-Naml, the chapter of the ant. It is not told as a fairy tale. It is a true lesson etched into divine words, a mirror through which believers reflect on wisdom, leadership, and submission to Allah. It begins not with her, but with another noble figure, Sulayman, the Prophet of Allah, a man granted dominion over winds and beasts and jinn, a ruler whose throne did not rest on wealth alone, but on obedience to his Lord. He could hear the whispering of ants and command the mighty jinn. His soldiers were not only men, they were creatures of air and flame. Birds carried his orders, winds bent to his command. And among these soldiers was one small creature who would change the fate of a nation. It was the hoopoe bird, a seemingly simple animal, yet honored in the Quran for its role in one of the most significant encounters between two rulers. One day Sulayman noticed the bird's absence. He questioned where it had gone. When it returned, it did not come with excuses. It came with news. News that would stir the prophet to action. The hoopoe told Sulayman of a distant land, ruled by a woman. A land filled with treasures and majestic architecture. But more than that, it was a land of people who bowed down to the sun. They worshipped a creation of Allah instead of the Creator. The hoopoe, though small, was disturbed by this. It saw their devotion directed toward the wrong source, and so it reported everything. Sulayman, wise and just, did not send armies. He sent words. He composed a message, a letter unlike any other, one that began with the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate. It called for peace through submission. It was not a demand for power. It was an invitation to truth. Sulayman ordered the bird to deliver it to the queen and to observe her response. The letter arrived. Bilqis read its contents with awe. She realized that she was not dealing with a mere king. This was a man who spoke with a divine authority. She gathered her advisors, her chiefs of council, her generals. She asked them what should be done. They told her of their strength, of their ability to wage war. But Bilqis, though a ruler of might, was a woman of intellect. She saw beyond the sword. She sensed something deeper. So she decided to test the sender. She sent back a lavish gift filled with treasures, gold, silver, and precious stones. It was both a gesture of diplomacy and a measure of character. But Sulayman was not moved by riches. He sent the gift back and declared that what Allah had given him was far greater. He told them he would come to them with forces that no one could resist if they did not submit. This was not arrogance. This was a reflection of Sulayman's role as a prophet, a man whose mission was to establish the worship of Allah on earth. Bilqis realized then that this was no ordinary man. She prepared to meet him, but before her arrival, Sulayman planned something remarkable. He asked who among his assembly could bring him the throne of the queen before she arrived. A powerful jinn stepped forward and said he could bring it before Sulayman rose from his place. But another man, one who possessed knowledge of the scripture, said he could bring it in the blink of an eye, and so it was. The throne appeared before Sulayman almost instantly. He looked at it and thanked Allah. Then he gave orders to alter the throne slightly to test whether the queen would recognize it. When Bilqis arrived, she was shown the throne and asked if it was hers. She hesitated. It looked like hers, yet not exactly. She answered wisely. It seemed to be hers, yet different. This was the beginning of her awakening. But the final moment came when she was invited into the palace. There she was asked to enter through what she saw as a body of water. She lifted her garment, thinking it was a pool, but it was not water. It was crystal, clear, and pure. She was astonished. In that moment, she realized the illusions of this world. She saw through the deceptions of perception, and she uttered words that would change her fate. She said, "My Lord, I have wronged myself, and I submit with Sulayman to Allah, Lord of the worlds." The words of Queen Bilqis were not mere speech. They were the surrender of a heart that had once walked in the shadows of misguidance and now stepped fully into the light of divine truth. It was not a forced conversion. It was a realization born from sincerity. She recognized the truth when it was presented to her with clarity and wisdom. She did not resist. She did not argue. She reflected and then submitted. In that single moment, she became a symbol for all those who seek guidance with an open heart. Her story is not one of war or violence. It is one of dialogue, of patience, of divine planning. Allah brought together two sovereigns, both powerful in their own realms, and showed the world that true greatness lies in submission to the one who created all power. Bilqis, though a queen of immense authority, bowed to the authority of her creator. Sulayman, though a prophet with dominion over creation, humbled himself constantly before Allah. This encounter teaches us that no matter how much we possess, our true value lies in our connection to our Lord. Now let us return to the question that has puzzled many. Was Queen Bilqis fully human, or was there something more to her nature? The Quran remains silent on this point. It gives no indication of supernatural origin. She is presented as a ruler, a woman of intellect, and a seeker of truth. Yet across centuries, various scholars and storytellers added layers to her story. Some claimed that her mother was a jinn. Others described her with features unlike other humans. Among these tales is the story that she had legs covered with hair like a jinn, and that when she lifted her garment at Sulayman's palace, her secret was revealed. But we must ask ourselves, where do these stories come from? They are not from the Quran. They are not from the most authentic hadith. They originate from narrations known as Israeliyat, tales passed down from Jewish and Christian traditions that were sometimes incorporated into early Islamic storytelling. These stories can be beautiful, poetic, and imaginative, but they must never override the clarity of revelation. The Quran does not concern itself with such descriptions. It does not mention her physical traits or her lineage to supernatural beings. What it emphasizes is her mind, her leadership, and her eventual submission to Allah. This silence is powerful. It tells us that what matters most is not the origin of her body, but the destination of her soul. Whether human or half jinn, what defined Bilqis was not her bloodline, but her choice. She chose to leave behind false worship. She chose to respond to the call of truth. And in that choice, she became greater than kings and queens. She became a lesson for all of humanity. It is important for us, as believers, to understand the difference between divine revelation and poetic storytelling. The former guides the heart, the latter may entertain the mind, but only revelation can illuminate the soul. Queen Bilqis' story in the Quran is not a fantasy. It is a mirror for rulers, for women, for seekers, for those who struggle between tradition and truth, between pride and surrender. Let us imagine the moment when she stood before Sulayman, a queen meeting a prophet, a woman of power standing before a man who commanded the winds. Yet in that moment, there was no fear. There was mutual respect. Sulayman did not humiliate her. He did not overpower her. He tested her with wisdom. He allowed her to reflect. He gave her space to choose. And she did. She chose Allah. And through that choice, her name was written in the Quran for all eternity. What honor is greater than being mentioned by Allah in His final revelation? What status is higher than being a symbol of transformation from error to faith? Queen Bilqis holds this honor, not because of lineage, not because of magic, but because of humility. The Quran tells us, whoever humbles themselves before Allah, He will raise them. And that is what we see in the story of Bilqis. From the throne of Saba to the submission in Sulayman's court, her journey is one of elevation through humility. The Quran does not just preserve her story, it elevates it to a place of timeless reflection. And so we must ask, why did Allah choose to include this specific narrative in his final revelation? Why did he reveal the encounter between a prophet and a queen, between submission and royalty, between light and darkness? Because within this story lie lessons that echo far beyond the desert lands of Saba. They reach into our homes, our hearts, and our daily decisions. Queen Bilqis ruled over a nation that worshiped the sun. It was not ignorance alone that led them to this path. It was culture, tradition, and the comfort of familiarity. People tend to follow what they inherit. They trust what their ancestors believed. But the truth is not always found in what is old. Sometimes it arrives in a new form, through a letter, a word, a verse, or a voice. Bilqis did not reject that voice. She listened, and in her listening, she changed the direction of her people. That is one of the greatest qualities of true leadership, the ability to hear beyond pride, the capacity to reflect beyond custom. She did not cling blindly to the ways of her forefathers. She recognized the light when it came, and she embraced it. That is why she was not destroyed. Unlike the many tyrants mentioned in the Quran who rejected the messengers, mocked the signs, and were punished with storms or stones, Bilqis was spared. Because she responded with humility, she accepted the truth. This is not only a lesson for leaders, it is a lesson for every soul. How many times does the truth knock at our door? How many times do we read a verse, hear a reminder, witness a sign, and yet close our hearts out of stubbornness or fear? Bilqis teaches us that guidance is available to those who seek it with sincerity, that it is never too late to submit, that it is never too late to submit, that greatness is not in the crown on the head, but in the submission of the heart. Now let us pause for a moment and reflect on the transformation of her soul. Imagine the journey she took, from a palace built on the worship of stars to a palace of glass built on the worship of the Most High. From bowing to a burning sphere in the sky to raising her hands to the one who created the sun itself. It was not just a change of belief, it was a journey of identity, a shift in her soul's direction. She moved from being a symbol of earthly power to a symbol of divine surrender. What can we learn from this? We live in a world that often celebrates outward power, thrones, titles, crowns, and wealth. But the Quran shifts our attention. It does not record her riches. It records her recognition, her moment of truth, her voice trembling as she said, "My Lord, indeed I have wronged myself." That single sentence carries the weight of redemption. It is the voice of a soul waking up, a queen removing her crown before the throne of Allah. The palace of Sulayman was not a place of intimidation. It was a place of unveiling. When she saw the glass floor and mistook it for water, it was not just a physical test, it was a metaphor. She saw clearly what was hidden. She understood what was real. And so do we when we read this story with our hearts open. We begin to realize that much of what we chase is illusion, that what seems solid is often fragile, that truth lies beneath the surface. Bilqis stepped into that truth. She left behind the sun to follow the light of Tawheed. And in doing so, she teaches us all a sacred lesson. No matter your position, your status, your past, the door of guidance is open. You only need to walk through it. And when you do, you will find not humiliation, but honor, not loss, but liberation, not shame, but salvation. The story of Bilqis does not end with her words of submission. Rather, it begins anew from that moment. Though the Quran does not continue with her tale after her declaration of faith, it leaves her in a state of peace, of clarity, of purpose. It leaves her name echoing through the centuries as a queen who chose guidance over pride. And that silence is intentional. Because the Quran is not just a book of stories, it is a book of signs. And the sign here is transformation. The scholars who reflected on her story found in it layers of meaning. They saw in her example the beauty of feminine strength balanced with wisdom. They saw a woman of great responsibility who did not allow arrogance to blind her. A ruler who could have dismissed the letter, could have challenged the prophet, could have chosen war. But instead, she chose reflection. And reflection is one of the greatest gateways to faith. There are moments in every believer's life when they are confronted with truth. It may not arrive through a bird or a scroll. It may come through a verse recited at dawn, a word spoken by a stranger, a dream that lingers long after waking. These are signs from our Lord. And in those moments, we are like Bilqis. We must decide whether to remain on the path we know or to follow the truth we feel. That decision defines our destiny. Bilqis teaches us that submission is not weakness. It is the ultimate strength. To bow not to creation, but to the Creator requires courage. To let go of ancient ways, to question inherited beliefs, to surrender to something greater than oneself. This is the essence of Islam. It is what every prophet called for. It is what every heart was created for. And when Bilqis uttered those words of surrender, she joined the ranks of those honored by Allah. Some scholars suggested that Sulayman may have married her after her conversion. Others say she returned to her land and ruled with justice guided by revelation. While the Quran does not confirm either version, both possibilities carry meaning. If she married the Prophet, it was a union of truth and leadership. If she ruled her land with new faith, then she became a guiding light for her people. Either way, her legacy was sealed by her choice to believe. Now let us reflect on one of the deeper dimensions of her story. Sulayman was given extraordinary power. He could command the winds, understand the speech of animals, summon jinn. Yet when it came to guiding a soul, he used words, not force, not fear. He sent a letter. And even after Bilqis accepted Islam, he did not boast. He praised Allah. This teaches us that da'wah, the call to Islam, must be rooted in wisdom, gentleness, and clarity. The goal is not to win arguments, it is to open hearts. Bilqis responded not to pressure, but to presentation, not to conquest, but to compassion. And that is why she accepted the truth. Her heart was moved not by fear, but by realization. She saw through the illusions. The crystal floor was just one sign among many, a physical example of how the world can deceive. What looks like water may be solid. What feels stable may collapse. But the word of Allah stands firm. It never changes. It never deceives. For those of us living in a time of endless noise, distraction, and misinformation, the clarity of her decision shines like a beacon. We are surrounded by calls from every direction, ideologies, opinions, movements. But amidst all this, there remains one constant, La ilaha illallah. There is no deity worthy of worship except Allah. This truth remains unchanged since the first human walked the earth. And it is this truth that Bilqis embraced. As Bilqis and her entourage finally reached the majestic court of Prophet Sulayman, the scene was one of quiet awe. The air was filled with anticipation, and the very atmosphere bore witness to a spiritual moment of immense magnitude. She approached with the dignity of a queen and the humility of a seeker of truth. Sulayman, with his noble presence and divine wisdom, greeted her not as a conqueror, but as a brother in submission to the one true Lord. He recognized in her a heart that was yearning for clarity, a soul that had traversed the valleys of doubt and inquiry, and now stood at the precipice of divine understanding. It was in this divine court that Sulayman asked her to recognize her throne. But this was not merely a test of perception. It was a symbolic gesture meant to awaken in her the realization of how Allah's knowledge and power transcends all dimensions. Her astonishment was not just at the transformation of her physical throne, but at the vastness of the spiritual truths being revealed to her. She responded with grace, acknowledging the favor of Allah upon her and the clarity that was now washing over her once shadowed heart. As she was guided into Solomon's palace, she encountered a floor so polished and clear that it resembled a flowing stream. She raised her garment, thinking she would walk through water. Sulayman gently corrected her. This moment, though seemingly subtle, held deep spiritual meaning. It was a symbol of the illusions we often walk through in life, mistaking reflections for reality and veils for truth. Bilqis, having journeyed through worldly power, now stood before the divine mirror that exposed the essence of all things. Her heart, once adorned with the jewels of kingdom and worldly knowledge, now opened to a light that no throne could rival. In that sacred moment, she uttered words that would echo through time. She submitted herself to Allah, the Lord of Solomon and of all worlds. Her transformation was complete. The queen who ruled over a land of sun worshippers had become a believer, guided not by compulsion but by conviction. And here the Quran concludes her story not with a record of her later reign or the continuation of her political life, but with the most important victory of all, the surrender of her heart to the Lord of the heavens and the earth. Her faith was her crown, her humility, her true throne. The guidance she received, the greatest treasure she ever possessed. This sacred narrative, preserved in the Quran, offers us far more than a historical account. It gives us a living lesson, a timeless mirror into the human soul's journey from ignorance to illumination. Queen Bilqis stands as a symbol of how even those in the highest worldly positions are not beyond the reach of divine mercy. Her story is not just about power or prophecy. It is about the echoing call of truth that reaches every heart, no matter how distant, and the transformative power of sincerity when one hears that call. The believers today are invited to reflect on this tale not as mere spectators, but as participants in a journey of their own. We too are travelers, searching for light in a world full of reflections and illusions. And just like Bilqis, we are called not to be dazzled by appearances, but to recognize the truth when it is presented with clarity, compassion, and divine guidance. The journey of Queen Bilqis did not only transform her own destiny, it left behind a beacon of reflection for all who read her story. It invites the believer to understand that the acceptance of truth is not confined to a certain people or class. It is not limited by culture, geography, or lineage. Rather, the truth is a light that seeks hearts willing to open, ears ready to listen, and minds prepared to surrender pride for purpose. When Bilqis stood before Solomon, she did not defend her status. She did not resist the signs shown to her. Instead, she allowed herself to be moved by divine wisdom. That humility is a hallmark of true faith. In her story, we see the perfect balance between reason and revelation. She used her intellect to analyze the situation. She observed the nature of Solomon's rule. She weighed the evidence before her. But when the signs became clear, she did not let pride blind her. She accepted guidance with grace. In that, there is a great lesson for us. Faith does not demand the death of reason. It invites reason to walk alongside revelation, to support it, to understand it, and ultimately, to witness its truth. The most powerful submission is not forced. It is born out of understanding. And so Bilqis becomes not just a queen in a historical tale. She becomes a symbol of spiritual enlightenment. Her transformation reminds us that the doors of divine mercy are always open, that Allah's guidance reaches those who seek sincerely, that no worldly honor is greater than the honor of being a servant of the most merciful. She chose submission over stubbornness. She chose light over illusion. She chose Allah over idols. And in doing so, she gained more than a kingdom. She gained her soul. For every believer, this story calls us to ask ourselves if we too are responding to the signs in our lives. Are we resisting the truth because of pride or fear or comfort? Or are we ready to walk the path of humility, reflection, and surrender? Allah places signs all around us, in moments of silence, in words we hear, in the lives of others, in the depths of our own conscience. It is for us to listen. It is for us to respond. In the noble character of Solomon and the sincere heart of Bilqis, we witness the beauty of guidance in its purest form. A prophet who ruled with justice and invited with gentleness. A queen who ruled with wisdom and embraced the truth when it came. Their meeting was not just a political event, it was a divine appointment, a moment written in the decree of the Almighty to show that even the most unlikely of hearts can be touched by the light of faith. Let the story of Bilqis live in your heart as a reminder that no matter your background, your journey, your doubts, or your past, the path to Allah is always open. Let it remind you that sincerity is the key that unlocks guidance, that humility is the bridge to wisdom, that the greatest honor is not in being served, but in serving the truth. And when you choose that path, you walk in the footsteps of those beloved to Allah. As we come to the close of this sacred story, let us reflect on the lessons carved in the heart of Queen Bilqis's journey. Her path teaches us that the greatest transformation begins not with grand displays of power, but with the quiet submission of the soul to the truth. She stands as a shining example that no matter the darkness we once walked in, the light of guidance can always reach us if we open our hearts sincerely. Her legacy is not of myth or legend, but of reality grounded in divine revelation. She reminds us that leadership is not measured by dominion over lands, but by the humility to bow before the Creator. That true strength is not in holding a throne, but in submitting to the will of Allah. And that every soul has the capacity to turn from error to faith when touched by sincere guidance. Dear brothers and sisters, as you listen to these words, I invite you to reflect on your own journey. Where are you standing today between the illusions of this world and the eternal truth of faith? Are you ready to step into the light as Bilqis did, to leave behind what distracts and to embrace what saves? The door of Allah's mercy is open wide. The call of guidance resounds through the heavens and the earth. Will you answer it with sincerity and courage? Before we end, please take a moment to subscribe to Islam Voice if you have not yet done so. Join a community dedicated to exploring the wisdom of our faith with hearts open to light and minds eager for truth. Your support allows this message to reach others seeking clarity in a world full of confusion. May Allah reward you for your commitment to knowledge and faith. Let us close with a prayer for ourselves and for all believers. May Allah grant us the wisdom to recognize truth, the courage to submit, and the perseverance to remain steadfast on the path of righteousness. May He make us like Bilqis, who chose faith over pride, light over darkness, submission over arrogance, and may He bless us with hearts that are humble, sincere, and full of love for Him. Remember always that no matter where you come from or what you have done, the mercy of Allah is greater. The story of Queen Bilqis is a timeless beacon of hope for all. Let it inspire you to seek, to question, and to embrace the guidance that leads to eternal peace. As-salāmu ʿalaykum wa raḥmatullāhi wa barakātuh.